Two pieces of land can sit on the same street and have completely different futures because of zoning. One lot may allow a single-family home. Another may allow apartments, shops, offices, or warehouses. Zoning is one of the invisible rules that shapes what a property can become. The planning office may reveal restrictions that are not obvious from the street view of the property. A height limit can turn an attractive development idea into a smaller and less profitable project. Property zoning is a local planning system that divides land into allowed uses. It helps cities decide where homes, businesses, factories, schools, parks, and mixed-use buildings can operate. The goal is order, safety, and planning, although zoning can also create controversy and limit supply. A buyer should check the zoning category before assuming that a home, shop, or rental plan is allowed. A residential zone may restrict commercial activity. An industrial zone may allow uses that create noise, truck traffic, or emissions. A commercial zone may support stores and offices but not heavy manufacturing. The label matters because it affects value, financing, design, and buyer interest. Density rules matter because they decide how many homes can legally fit on the land. Zoning does more than say what use is allowed. It can control building height, setbacks, density, parking requirements, lot coverage, signage, and sometimes the number of units. A developer may own land but still be unable to build the size or type of project they imagined. A planning office review can prevent an expensive mistake before drawings, permits, and financing begin. Imagine someone buys a small house hoping to replace it with a 4-unit rental building. If zoning allows only one dwelling unit, the plan may fail unless the owner obtains a variance, rezoning, or special approval. The land may be physically suitable but legally restricted. A height limit may stop a builder from adding floors even when the land and demand both support it. Rezoning changes the rules for a property or area. It can increase value if land becomes eligible for more profitable use. A site rezoned from low-density residential to mixed use may attract developers. But rezoning often requires hearings, public comment, planning review, and political support. Parking requirements can shrink a project by taking space that could otherwise be used for units or customers. A variance is different. It is usually a limited exception from a specific rule, such as a setback or height limit, often because the property has unusual constraints. A variance does not rewrite the entire zoning map. It gives relief in a defined situation. A rezoning hearing can attract neighbors, planners, and politicians because the change affects more than one owner. Special use permits allow certain activities if conditions are met. A school, place of worship, daycare, or small clinic may be allowed in a zone only after review. The city may require parking, traffic plans, noise limits, or operating restrictions. The risk becomes clearer when variance is checked before the decision becomes expensive to reverse. Zoning affects property value by shaping future use. Land that can legally support apartments may be worth more than similar land restricted to one house. A corner lot with commercial permission may attract buyers who would ignore a purely residential parcel. Zoning protects residents from some incompatible uses, but it can also block housing that a city badly needs. Zoning also protects some owners from incompatible uses. A homeowner may not want a noisy factory next door. A city may separate heavy industry from homes for health and safety reasons. The challenge is balancing protection with flexibility and housing supply. Parking rules become expensive when a small site cannot fit enough spaces to satisfy the code. Parking rules are a hidden zoning cost. A small restaurant may need a certain number of parking spaces before opening. An apartment project may require spaces per unit. These rules can make projects larger, more expensive, or impossible on tight urban lots. Setback rules should be checked before designing an addition, garage, or second unit. Setbacks determine how far buildings must sit from property lines. Height limits determine how tall they can be. Lot coverage rules limit how much land can be covered by structures. These details can decide whether an addition, garage, or redevelopment plan is realistic. The useful comparison is parking rule is checked before the decision becomes expensive to reverse. Non-conforming uses create another layer. A building may have been legal when built but no longer match current zoning. It may be allowed to continue, but expansion, rebuilding after damage, or changing use can become complicated. A non-conforming building can be useful, but rebuilding or expanding it may trigger new limits. Investors study zoning before buying because the best-looking deal can collapse under land use rules. A cheap parcel is not cheap if it cannot be used for the intended project. Due diligence should include zoning maps, permitted uses, overlays, and conversations with the local planning office. A setback requirement can decide whether a renovation is practical or needs a costly redesign. Homebuyers should care too. Zoning nearby can affect traffic, views, noise, and future development. An empty lot across the street may not stay empty. If it is zoned for commercial or multifamily use, the neighborhood may change. Setbacks are easy to overlook because they are legal boundaries, not physical walls. Zoning is not always permanent. Cities update plans as populations grow, housing shortages worsen, or transit expands. A new rail station may lead to higher density zoning nearby. A flood risk area may face stricter building rules. The decision changes when rezoning hearing is checked before the decision becomes expensive to reverse. For a homeowner, the safest step is to check zoning before spending money on plans. An architect may draw a beautiful addition, but the city can still reject height, setback, parking, or use. The planning counter is not a formality, it can decide whether the project exists. Density rules shape the number of homes a neighborhood can add over time. Developers also study zoning changes years before construction. A parcel near transit may be ordinary today but valuable if the city later allows taller buildings. This is why land speculation often follows planning meetings, infrastructure announcements, and public discussions about density. Transit access can make density more valuable, but the zoning code still decides what can be built. Zoning can also affect renters indirectly. If rules limit the number of homes that can be built in desirable areas, rental supply may stay tight. The tenant may never read the zoning code, but the code can still influence rent, commute time, and available housing choices. The planning office is where assumptions about future use meet the written rules. For a homeowner, the safest step is to check zoning before spending money on plans. An architect may draw a beautiful addition, but the city can still reject height, setback, parking, or use. The planning counter is not a formality, it can decide whether the project exists. The safer reading is that variance is checked before the decision becomes expensive to reverse. The practical lesson is to treat zoning as part of the property, not a side detail. Before assuming what land can do, check the rules. A property is not only its size, location, and condition. It is also the set of permissions attached to it.